Welcome back. This is segment 2 of Citizens Forum. Our guest in this segment is Chris Cook. Chris is has a show on CFUV Radio, and he's also the, managing editor of Pacific Free Press, which is a really good website. So, Chris, you wanted to start by talking...
Well, I wanted to start by saying Happy Rhinoceros Day. I mean, as well as the car-free, it's the Rhinoceros Survival Day or something. So This is a crowded day on the calendar for...
For good things.
Good things, yeah. Keep those cars away from those rhinoceri. They need all the help they can get, guys. But also, Jack, this week is coming up on the anniversary of the bear with me now, Ayotzinapa in Mexico. This is where these 43 students were kidnapped almost a year ago last year. Well, a year, depending on what date people are watching us. So 43 students at a teacher's college down in Guerrero province, just outside of Acapulco, in Iguala township, were kidnapped essentially by the police and handed over to a drug cartel and disappeared and never to be seen again, at least not yet. The consensus is that these people were killed, and the story is that once the drug cartel, the Guerrero Unidos, got their hands on these students, thanks to the local police, they drove them out to the city dump and assassinated them and burnt the bodies and presumably scattered the remains. That's the story, but the relatives don't believe it. And I admit, when I first heard their doubts about it, I thought, well, this is just denial on their part. But no, if you look at what's going on in Mexico, things are so crazy there. There's actually private police forces, vigilante police forces, and prisons up in the hills that aren't run by the government, but are run by these vigilantes and by drug cartels themselves. It's a crazy place, and so it is quite possible that these students, some or maybe even all of them, are still surviving, held prisoner somewhere in the backwoods of Mexico.
Why was anybody angry at these people?
Well, the school the normal school that is what it's called, that these students came from, is renowned for being troublemakers. They're leftists. They are in the streets demonstrating all the time. They were on their way that day to a demonstration. There was in the town of Iguala a parade planned, and the wife of the mayor, who had run out his term, was expected to announce that she was going to run for mayor herself. As it happens, the gang I mentioned, the Guerrero Unidos, was actually founded by this very woman and her family. They founded this drug cartel. Her and her husband took over the political end of the town as well. And her husband was worried that these guys would go and make a big noise and ruin her speech. So he had his buddies phone up the Guerrero Unidos and said, hey, can you, run some interference and keep these students away? Now, we don't know if this was sort of, will no one rib me of this troublesome night situation, or that he actually meant them to be dragged away and assassinated. We're not really sure, but the mayor and his wife, who are both in prison right now, charged with murder, extortion, kidnapping, you name it, were totally involved in this situation, and so they didn't want to ruin the speech.
Right. And it's worth mentioning the role of the United States government in the whole drug thing, because they were running, the U.S. government was running guns in a very major way to the drug cartels. It looks like they wanted to destroy Mexico, and from what you're saying, it kind of sounds like they have.
Mexico's in a real state. There's no question of that. But the Operation Fast and Furious came out a few years ago, and the plan was, on the American side, the ATF and others, they were going to.
That was you're telling the story.
This is
the official
plan.
Story.
They would give weapons that they had marked to certain people that they knew, who would hand these over to drug gangs, right. And then the theory being that they could trace them and then figure out, the transit and who was involved with all these. It might have sounded good at the time. These weapons, when they were found, actually were found, after they'd been used to kill people, and in some cases, American agents themselves were found killed by the weapons the Americans had
to me, the U.S. government was deliberately running guns to the drug
gangs.
The
bottom line of it is they were sending loads of weapons and ammunition into this cauldron.
That's what they'll do. I mean,
no, that was really
to
crazy.
destroy another nation, you know. And if they made the drugs legal, I mean, the entire problem with the drug situation is that they're illegal in the United States, and they won't.
The United States. Well, it's become a whole currency unto itself. So it could have been kumquats or anything, right? Yeah. And with making it illegal, makes it so valuable that people were killing each other right and left. And that is what's happened. That was the Merida Initiative in 2006. The war on drugs has been going on for 20 some odd years, you know, but they turned it up with the Merida Initiative in 2006.
This is in Mexico.
Yeah, this is in Mexico, and this is an agreement between Mexico, the U.S., and Canada. They're NAFTA partners. And the government in Mexico decided to bring the military in and deploy the military as in a real, you know, like a full-scale war, yeah.
And the drug gangs.
Well, yeah, 50,000 people have been killed, they figure, since 2006, but the numbers are pretty nebulous. I mean, I heard numbers like 250,000 Mexicans have been killed in the 20 years that this war on drugs has been going on. And this is, you know, directly involved with this. Now, the numbers are hard, you know, they're hard to pin down. But, I mean, it's been a disaster. And the price, I mean, the amount of drugs going into the United States sourced from Mexico has skyrocketed since this war on drugs began. You know, like now something like 90% of the drugs going into the States come in via Mexico, whereas before it was less than 20% before this war commenced. So, I mean, you figure that one out.
Well, when I see those things happen, I always think that was the plan. I mean, the United States, for some reason, wanted to destabilize Mexico, and
well, you know, when we signed the free trade agreement and the NAFTA agreements, that was what really did it, and it kicked off all kinds of movements. There's other people I wanted to talk about. You know, most of them are dead or in prison, but Miguel Angel Jimenez, he's dead. He describes Guerrero State as a great cemetery. When they went looking for these 43 students I mentioned, right? Because it created such a hue and cry. People are going missing and being kidnapped and showing up dead in Mexico all the time. But this particular one just seemed to be one massacre too far, or alleged massacre. They got people to go out into the woods and start digging up and looking for mass graves. Well, it seems in Guerrero, if you go a couple hundred yards or even less off the main road and put a shovel in the ground, you're going to find human remains. This is how many people, none of them are DNA matches for these 43 people, but they're finding dead bodies in shallow graves all over the place.
So Mexico is a disaster.
It is, well, and Guerrero is the worst. Acapulco, the beautiful city I've been to myself, actually, the tourist mecca, or days past, not now, I don't expect, is the most dangerous city in Mexico. The third most dangerous city in the entire world. Now you think about that. You know, it's the third most dangerous city in all the world. All the wars, you know, Syria, all these other places, Acapulco. So, I mean, the next time you plan your vacation, you might want to go onto the Atlantic side of Mexico.
You know, and these things, I don't know if you'll agree, but I don't think these things happen by accident. And we could be next, you know, when...
Well, what we see in common, when you know, you look at Syria and you see this mass migration, there's this desperate diaspora going on. It's caused by a war. Well, in South America, in Central America, and in Mexico too, there's been this great diaspora. There's walls up on the American border. You can see them preach about, oh, those Germans and these Europeans putting up walls. The United States is, you know, Donald Trump says he'll girdle the whole country with walls.
So people are running from Mexico with the insanity.
The free trade, it pushed the indigenous first and then the campesinos off the land and into the cities. And it created, you know, a empty territory for their friends, their corporate friends and resource extractors to go down there and get at the resources, right? They've done it in Colombia. If you remember Plan Colombia, when they were spraying, you know, supposedly as a war on drug and getting rid of the cocaine, you know, DynCorp and these other mercenary corporate outfits, before there even was a Blackwater, were down there, you know, making loads of money, spraying poisons over the richest and most biodiverse area in the whole world down in Colombia, but driving all of the Iguala people and all of the indigenous people out of the countryside into these barrios in the cities where their life is, as you can imagine, awful. all so that Occidental energy can go down there and get their hands on the resources, oil, minerals of all kinds, gems, a cornucopia of wealth for these big companies. What it creates is this great mass movement of people trying desperately to find a place where they can live. They can't live at home anymore. They go up through Mexico, through Central America to North America. Well, you see the same thing now. A war has been created artificially in Syria and throughout that whole region, the arc of instability, as one plan calls it, and it's created this great wave. Now, they've been held in various camps in Lebanon and Jordan and in Turkey primarily, in their millions for these last years. I mean, remember the Iraqi refugees that all went to where? To Syria. I mean, there's millions of people from the wars in Iraq have ended up in Syria. Now they and the Syrians themselves are being moved along through Lebanon, Jordan, up into Turkey, and then Turkey opened the door on the west and said, okay, well, why don't you guys just take off, Now, why they did that, that's an open question. You don't hear much about that in the media. That young child, the kid found on the beach, Aylan Kurdi. Kurdi is a Kurdish name, by the way, and that's a whole other thing. But in Turkey, they're having trouble with the Kurds. In Turkey, their leader, Aylan, is kind of crazy, and he's also in political trouble. So he's creating diversions, perhaps, and upping his war against the Kurds. The Turkish army isn't fighting ISIS. They're fighting the Kurds, who have been the most effective fighters against ISIS. Figure that one out, And Germany refused to give them more weapons in Turkey, some advanced weaponry. So maybe he thought, okay, well, if you don't give me what I want, maybe you can have a few million refugees knocking on your door. I don't know. It's not what it appears, though. There's much more going on, more than a young child on a beach, for sure.
Chris, thank you for a couple of remarkable stories. Yeah. And thank you for watching this segment of Citizens Forum.